It began quietly, almost too quietly, like a soft wave rolling in before the storm. One morning, people along the north coast woke up to see tall metal fences being built where they used to walk freely. The fishermen of Street, Anne, who had cast their nets there for generations, found new signs hammered into the sand. Private property trespassers will be prosecuted. At first, everyone thought it was a mistake. A temporary closure, maybe for cleaning or construction. But by afternoon, the truth began to spread like wildfire through the villages the beaches had been sold. Radio hosts debated it live on air, trying to confirm the news. "How can a beach be sold?" one man shouted. "That's like selling the sun." But soon, documents began to leak, stamped, sealed, and signed by people no one had elected. It turned out that months earlier, in air-conditioned conference rooms far from the island's salty wind, a deal had been struck between government officials and a foreign investment group called Ocean Gate Holdings. The group promised sustainable tourism development, but buried in the contract's fine print was a shocking clause: exclusive ownership of the coastline for 99 years. The people had never heard of Ocean Gate Holdings, but within days, their logo was everywhere on beach gates, on heavy trucks, on glossy brochures showing luxury resorts where locals once played dominoes and roasted fish. The Prime Minister went on national television to calm the nation. "This is progress," he said, smiling stiffly. "These investments will bring jobs, infrastructure, and opportunity. They're faster won." But in the streets, the reaction was furious. Women who sold fruit by the shore began crying. Fishermen threw their nets into the road in protest. And an old man, standing by the closed gates at Fisherman's Beach, whispered the words that would soon become a rallying cry: "If DC na free. De people na free." That night, the power went out across Montego Bay. Some said it was a grid failure, others said it was sabotage, a desperate attempt to stop what was coming next. Because at midnight, a secret recording began circulating online. A voice that sounded eerily similar to a government minister was heard saying, "The foreign partners already wired the first payment. Don't worry about the backlash. By the time they realize, it'll be too late." The recording spread like wildfire. Within hours, it reached every corner of the island. On social media, hashtags exploded. Number Free to Beach and number Who Sold Jamaica. By dawn, thousands of people had gathered outside Parliament. They carried buckets of sand from their local beaches and poured them on the steps, shouting, "You sell de land, but you cyan sell de soul." Police were called in to disperse the crowd. Tear gas filled the air, and the clash was broadcast live. The whole world watched as an island known for peace and music erupted in anger. Meanwhile, in a dark room in Kingston, a journalist named Nia Morgan sat before her laptop, her heart racing. She had just received a flash drive from an anonymous source, one labeled Project Coral. When she opened the files, what she found left her speechless. It wasn't just a deal for tourism. It was an entire plan, a global strategy to turn Jamaica's coastline into private luxury zones for the world's elite. The project had been signed under secrecy, approved by consultants from overseas, and backed by international banks. In exchange, the government would receive development loans that the people would spend decades repaying. The most chilling part was the map. Every major beach, Negril, Ocho Rios, Runaway Bay, even parts of Portland was marked in red. Red meant restricted, and in bold letters at the bottom of the page were 3 words that made her blood run cold: public access terminated. Outside, the protests were growing. People burned fake contracts in the streets. Musicians wrote songs about the betrayal. Students painted murals showing the sea locked behind chains. The government issued another statement, calling the unrest an overreaction. But no one was listening anymore. That night, an old woman from Montego Bay went live on Facebook, holding a handful of sand. Tears ran down her face as she said, "This sand feed me father, me grandfather, me whole family. Now dem tell me can't walk, ya? Who are we now if we can't touch to see?" Her video was viewed millions of times in a single day. Foreign news outlets picked up the story. They called it the Great Beach Sellout. But behind the headlines, darker forces were moving. Because while the people were fighting on the streets, Another secret meeting was taking place inside a luxury hotel in Kingston. Behind closed doors, foreign investors, lobbyists, and a few powerful locals were raising their glasses to a new beginning. One of them said, "Once the people calm down, we can start Phase 2 shoreline zoning for private villas." And another replied with a grin, "Don't worry. By the time they realize, there won't be any public shore left to fight for." The laughter echoed down the marble hallway as the waves outside crashed softly, like the island's heartbeat fading into silence. By sunrise the next morning, Jamaica was no longer the same island. The news had spread across every corner, from the hills of Street Elizabeth to the fishing villages of Portland. The beaches that had once been open to everyone were now guarded by security men in blue uniforms. Some wore sunglasses and carried foreign rifles. They didn't speak much, only said, "Authorized guests only." Even the local fishermen, who had worked those waters all their lives, were turned away. "We just fishing, boss," one man pleaded. "We not trouble nobody." The guard only pointed to the sign that said, "Private shoreline trespassers will be arrested." The fishermen left, but not in silence. They stood in their boats, holding their nets high, shouting into the wind, "Unu sell we out!" By noon, the protest that started in Kingston had reached every parish. People marched barefoot through the streets, carrying buckets of seawater. Children wrote on cardboard, "We want back we beach." The rhythm of drums echoed across the island, but behind the music, there was fear. The government had declared a temporary state of emergency, calling the protests a threat to national stability. Military trucks rolled into town centers. Soldiers blocked main roads leading to the beaches. In Montego Bay, things turned violent. A group of young men tried to break through the fence near Doctor's Cave Beach. Security forces fired warning shots. A teenager fell the first casualty of what locals began calling the Beach War. That evening, a video surfaced online showing armed guards escorting a convoy of black SUVs into the resort construction site. In one of the vehicles, people claimed they saw the outline of a government minister sitting beside a foreign man in a white suit. The caption under the video read, "They meeting again." At the same time, journalist Nia Morgan was still digging into the flash drive marked Project Coral. What she discovered next was more explosive than anyone could have imagined. The files included emails between Jamaican officials and Ocean Gate Holdings executives. One message, dated 6 months earlier, read, "All arrangements confirmed. Local access must be limited. The illusion of inclusion will pacify the population." That line, "illusion of inclusion," hit her like a knife. It meant the new resorts would pretend to be open to locals, but only for those who could afford the membership fees. Another document revealed that foreign banks had already transferred $800 million to offshore accounts linked to shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands. The money trail led straight to people in power. Nia printed every page, knowing the risk. People had disappeared for less. At 2 a.m., she received a message from an unknown number. "If you value your life, stop digging. The sand is deeper than you think." She stared at the screen, her hands trembling. The message vanished a moment later, but she couldn't stop. She knew the island was bleeding, and silence was the weapon keeping it enslaved. By morning, her story was ready. The headline read, "The Secret Deal That Sold Jamaica's Sea." She clicked publish. The article went live, and within minutes, the world exploded. Radio stations interrupted their programming to read her report. Social media flooded with anger. Hashtags like Number Jamaica for Jamaicans and Number Free de Shore trended across the Caribbean. Foreign news outlets picked it up, calling it the biggest corruption scandal in the region's history. The government denied everything. They said the documents were fabricated and foreign propaganda. But the people didn't buy it. Because the fences were real, the guards were real, the pain was real. That night, Kingston was on fire. Protesters clashed with police near Halfway Tree. Tear gas filled the air, but the crowd refused to move. They chanted louder, "We not selling out again." From her apartment, Nia watched the chaos unfold on her television, tears streaming down her face. She knew this wasn't just about sand, it was about freedom. And as the island burned, another message appeared in her inbox. It was from a blocked address. The subject line read, "There's more. Meet me tomorrow night." Come alone. Attached was a single image, a scanned page from the Project Coral files showing a new heading in bold red letters. Phase 2. Full coastal privatization activation date. August 17. The date was only 3 days away. If that phase went forward, every public beach in Jamaica would be gone permanently. Nia closed her laptop, her heart pounding. Somewhere in the darkness, a storm was coming, not from the sea, but from the people. That night, rain fell hard over Kingston. The sound of thunder mixed with the echo of police sirens and angry chants still lingering in the streets. Nia sat alone in her car, parked behind an old warehouse by the harbor. The message had said to come alone, no phones, no cameras, no lights. She waited. The only light came from the reflections of the city on the wet ground. Then, a shadow appeared, a man in a long raincoat, face hidden beneath a hood. He moved cautiously, checking over his shoulder before stepping closer. "You, Nia Morgan?" he asked in a low voice. She nodded. He handed her a waterproof envelope and whispered, "What you found is only the surface. They're building something far bigger, not just resorts. They're digging under the sea." Nia frowned. "Under the sea? What you mean?" The man glanced around nervously. "There's a project, a tunnel, maybe even a vault. They call it the Coral Line. Foreign engineers working at night. They say it's to protect against erosion, but it's not. They're laying cables, deep ones, connecting the island's coast to other places. Your sea is no longer just sand and water. It's data, it's gold, it's control." Before she could ask more, headlights flashed nearby. The man stiffened. "They followed you," he whispered. "Don't trust anyone in uniform." He pressed the envelope into her hands. "If I disappear, you must release it. The truth must come out." Then he turned and vanished into the rain. Nia opened the envelope just enough to see a few words printed across the top page. Confidential. The Coral Line Agreement, Kingston Offshore Data Hub. It walsies. She felt her stomach twist. It wasn't just about beaches or money anymore. Jamaica's ocean was being transformed into a digital frontier, one owned by outsiders. She drove straight home, every turn feeling like a trap. When she reached her apartment, she hid the envelope under the floorboard and turned off all lights. That night, she barely slept. By morning, the island was on edge. Roads were blocked. Internet outages spread mysteriously. Foreign embassies issued travel advisories, warning citizens to avoid protests. Something was brewing. At 9 a.m., the government held a press conference. The Minister of Tourism stood before the cameras, his voice calm but firm. "We are not selling Jamaica," he said. "We are protecting her future." But as he spoke, someone leaked footage of heavy machinery digging deep trenches near Ocho Rios under the cover of night. The video showed pipes, cranes, and a large sign that read, "Coral Line Development Zone Restricted Area." The island erupted again. In Negril, hundreds of people marched to the shoreline, tearing down sections of the metal fencing with their bare hands. Police arrived but were overwhelmed. One officer threw his baton into the sand and shouted, "Me can't fight for the wrong side no more." In Portmore, fishermen refused to bring in their catch, saying the sea was under occupation. Meanwhile, Nia was working non-stop, scanning the documents. The deeper she read, the darker it got. She discovered that the Coral Line project was backed by a coalition of Western tech companies, global banks, and Caribbean politicians. They planned to turn Jamaica's undersea network into the main data route connecting North America to Africa. And the shocking part, Jamaica would receive nothing. Every byte of data, every dollar of profit would flow offshore. In exchange, local officials would get consulting fees disguised as environmental grants. One document had the signature of someone she recognized, a senior minister who had publicly denied any knowledge of the deal. At that moment, Nia knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. She called her producer at Radio Nation and said, "Get ready. I'm going live at 8 tonight. No editing, no cuts. People must hear this." Her voice shook, but her spirit was strong. That evening, she sat in front of the microphone, papers scattered around her, the air heavy with truth. The red light blinked on. "This is Nia Morgan," she began. "And what I'm about to tell you might change how you see this country forever. They didn't just sell the beaches, they sold what's beneath them. They're turning Jamaica into a testing ground for foreign-controlled land, sea, and now information. The Coral Line isn't protection, it's a leash. Within minutes, her broadcast was trending. Every radio, taxi, and smartphone was tuned in. The island held its breath as she read excerpts from the documents live on air. But halfway through her report, the signal cut out. Static filled the frequency. Then, silence. Across Jamaica, the broadcast went dark. Moments later, unmarked black vehicles were seen speeding toward the Radio Nation studio. By the time supporters arrived, the building was empty. The doors smashed open, the lights off. Nia was gone. No one knew if she had been taken or if she had escaped. But that night, every Jamaican knew one thing for sure. The fight was no longer just about who owned the beaches. It was about who owned the truth. For 2 full days, Nia Morgan vanished. No one saw her car, her phone was dead, her apartment ransacked. The envelope that once held the Coral Line Agreement was gone. Rumors swept through the island like wildfire. Some said she was taken by foreign agents. Others swore she escaped to Cuba by boat. A few whispered that she was hiding somewhere in the Blue Mountains, protected by a small group of retired soldiers who still believed in Jamaica's freedom. Meanwhile, the government continued to assure the public that everything was under control. But the people no longer believed a word. Every morning, thousands gathered near closed beaches, waving the national flag upside down, a symbol of distress. Then, late one evening, something strange happened. A video appeared on social media. Grainy, shaky footage. It showed Nia in a dark room, her face lit by a candle. Her eyes looked tired but fierce. "My fellow Jamaicans," she whispered, "if you are watching this, it means I'm no longer safe. But I have hidden the truth where they can't find it." Inside that truth is the proof that our island was sold under our feet, not by force, but by signatures. The beaches are only the beginning. They plan to privatize the sea itself. The video cut off after just 52 seconds, but it was enough. The people exploded. Protests turned into full-scale rebellion. Fishermen in Port Royal blocked the harbor using their boats. Farmers from Street Mary marched to Kingston with machetes held high, not to harm, but to show they were ready to defend their land. Even police officers began removing their badges, saying, "We serve D people, not D thieves." In the chaos, another leak surfaced online, this time from an anonymous account called Freedom Sands. The documents were labeled Top Secret Jamaica Coastal Revenue Sharing Agreement. Inside, it was written in black and white. Jamaica had agreed to give 85% of all profits from the Coral Line and resort deals to 3 foreign companies: Ocean Gate Holdings, USA, Blue Mar Capital, UK, and Coral Trust Limited, Cayman Islands. In exchange, the country received development aid of only $9 million, barely enough to build one modern hospital. And worse, one section listed the beneficiaries of offshore accounts, including names of high-ranking officials, ministers, and even 2 foreign ambassadors. It was betrayal in writing. By dawn, the island was paralyzed. Airports closed. The Prime Minister's convoy was blocked near Spanish Town by angry citizens demanding answers. His guards drew their weapons, but the crowd stood firm. "No more lies," they shouted. "Give back we beach!" Inside the Parliament building, panic ruled. Ministers whispered of resigning or fleeing the island. Helicopters were spotted leaving Kingston, heading toward private yachts offshore. Then came another shock. A foreign cargo ship anchored in the distance began offloading containers marked Ocean Gate Engineering Equipment. But locals on nearby boats noticed something odd. The containers weren't holding construction tools, they were filled with computer servers and surveillance hardware. The Coral Line wasn't just about underwater cables. It was about monitoring Jamaica's communications, controlling digital flow, and storing global data right under Caribbean soil. It was espionage disguised as investment. Across the island, tension reached its breaking point. People feared invasion more than protest. No one trusted the army, the police, or even the news. But deep in the hills, something was happening. Old revolutionaries, men who once fought in the 1,970 seconds for the island's dignity, began regrouping. They called themselves the Sons of the Sand. Their goal, to protect Jamaica's shores from foreign control by any means necessary. That night, the Sons of the Sand hijacked a government radio frequency and broadcast Nia's video again on repeat. Her voice echoed across the island. They took our beaches, they took our water, they took our future, but they can't take our spirit. Every home, every shop, every taxi heard those words. The following morning, the Prime Minister finally addressed the nation. His face appeared pale on television. "We must remain calm," he said. "Foreign investors have temporarily paused operations. There is no conspiracy." But as he spoke, viewers noticed something behind him, a foreign flag, standing beside the Jamaican one, half visible, blue and white, with a corporate logo instead of a nation's emblem. Within minutes, the clip went viral, with one caption, "Who really runs Jamaica?" By sunset, thousands surrounded the parliament. People sang Bob Marley songs. Others carried sand in small bottles, lifting them toward the sky as a symbol of what could never be sold, the spirit of the island. And somewhere in the shadows, Nia Morgan was watching. "Alive," she whispered to herself. They wanted silence. Now they'll hear the roar of the sea, because she still had one file left, the one no one had seen yet. The one that could expose not only Jamaica's betrayal, but the entire network of corruption across the Caribbean. The file was called Operation Paradise Lease. The file labeled Operation Paradise Lease was unlike anything Nia had seen before. It wasn't just about Jamaica, it was about an entire chain of islands, from the Bahamas down to Trinidad. Every page revealed secret meetings, offshore transfers, and handshakes between Caribbean leaders and Western corporations. The documents showed that over the last 10 years, an invisible alliance had been buying up beaches, ports, and even small islands, piece by piece. The operation was led by a shadow organization registered in London under a shell company named Mariner Global Holdings, whose real owners were hidden behind layers of fake directors and trust accounts. But the leaked communications told the truth. They planned to turn the Caribbean into a private archipelago controlled by foreign billionaires, where locals would only work as staff or entertainers. It was colonization reborn in business suits. One memo read, "The Caribbean will be our crown jewel. Maintain tourism as the illusion. Control sand, ports, and sea lanes quietly. Public perception must remain tropical paradise." When Nia read those words, she clenched her fists. The island she loved had been sold, marketed, and disguised. And now, the people who once harvested the sea couldn't even touch their own sand. That night, she met with the Sons of the Sand in a hidden cabin near Port Antonio. The air smelled of salt and smoke. Around her were old men and young faces, fishermen, teachers, even ex-soldiers. "We can't win with guns," one of them said. "They own the sky, the money, and the law." Nia placed the USB drive on the table. "Then we fight with truth. The world must see this." A tall man named Darius, a former soldier with scars on his arms, nodded slowly. "If we leak this, they'll come for all of us." "They already have," she replied. They agreed to act before dawn. The plan was simple but dangerous: hijack the national television signal and broadcast the files live to the entire island. Meanwhile, in Kingston, the government was collapsing from the inside. 2 ministers had resigned, one had fled to Miami. The Prime Minister's approval rating had dropped to single digits. Foreign investors began pulling out quietly, moving their ships and machinery offshore. But the worst was yet to come. The leaked documents from Operation Paradise Lease revealed something even more chilling. The deals were protected under international security treaties, meaning if Jamaica tried to cancel them, foreign governments could send military support to protect investments. It wasn't just economic slavery, it was legal occupation. At midnight, Nia and the Sons of the Sand drove through backroads with a small van full of equipment. They parked near an abandoned broadcast tower that once served Jamaica's national TV network. Darius climbed the ladder and reconnected the cables, while Nia prepared her message. The rain started falling again, heavy and relentless, as if the island itself was weeping. When the clock struck 3 a.m., the signal cut across every television, radio, and phone. Screens flickered. Then Nia's face appeared, her eyes fierce but calm. "People of Jamaica and people of the world," she began, her voice echoing across the airwaves. "They thought they could silence us with contracts and fear, but the truth cannot drown. Operation Paradise Lease is a plan to sell every beach, every reef, every grain of sand across the Caribbean to foreign powers. It's not development, it's domination. And tonight, we are showing you their own signatures." She pressed a button. The documents rolled live on the screen. Bank statements, signed contracts, photographs of luxury meetings between ministers and foreign executives. One video showed the Prime Minister laughing as he clinked glasses with the OceanGate CEO in a private yacht off Montego Bay. The nation erupted. People poured into the streets before sunrise. Cars stopped in the middle of highways. Church bells rang across the island. Mothers woke their children to watch history unfold. Within hours, the story went global. BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, every network ran the headline. Leaked files expose massive Caribbean land grab by Western corporations. Pressure mounted fast. The United Nations called for an inquiry. The U.S. Embassy released a cautious statement urging calm and respect for foreign partnerships. But the people were past calm. By afternoon, massive crowds gathered at Emancipation Park in Kingston. They raised their fists and shouted, "We want back, we land! We want back, we sea!" Meanwhile, government forces were hunting Nia. Drones circled the hills where she was last seen. Helicopters thundered over the forest. Inside the cabin, Darius looked out the window and said quietly, "They coming." Nia smiled faintly. "Then let them come. The truth is already free." At that moment, something unexpected happened. The broadcast signal was hijacked again, but this time not by them. The same documents began streaming from unknown servers across the world. Someone else had copied the files and uploaded them everywhere. Twitter, YouTube, even the dark web. The world had seen it all. There was no going back. The people of Jamaica didn't wait for politicians anymore. Local communities started removing fences themselves. Beaches that had been closed for months were reopened by the hands of those who built the island. Fishermen went back to the water. For the first time in decades, the waves belonged to the people again. But even as freedom spread through the island, Nia knew it wasn't over. Because the last page of the document, the one no one had read on air, held a single line written in red ink. "Next target, Africa phase begins 2026. Nia stared at it in silence. The fight for Jamaica was only the beginning. In the days that followed, the island changed forever. The Coral Line project was shut down. The fences that once divided the beaches were torn apart by the same hands that built them. Foreign executives vanished overnight, flying out of Kingston in private jets before the morning Sunday. But the scars remained on the land, and in the hearts of the people. Nia Morgan's broadcast became legendary. Every radio in the Caribbean replayed her message. "They took our beaches, they took our water, but they can't take our spirit." Her words were carved on walls, printed on t-shirts, whispered in schools. Children began calling her the voice of the sand. But the story didn't end there. A month later, as the island slowly healed, an international tribunal announced an economic investigation into Jamaica's handling of foreign contracts. They called it a review, but everyone knew what it meant. Pressure. Western nations wanted to re-establish control without admitting defeat. At the same time, mysterious figures began arriving in the Caribbean: consultants, diplomats, and corporate investigators. They offered new aid packages, loans, and restoration projects. The same game with new names. One evening, as the sun fell over Montego Bay, Nia received a call from a blocked number. A man's voice spoke quietly. "You don't know me, but I work inside the embassy. They're planning something called Project Second Tide. It's the same plan, under a new name. Only this time, they're not after sand. They're after ownership of airspace and digital rights." Nia's heart froze. "You mean satellites? Communications?" "Yes," the man said. "They call it data sovereignty assistance. They want control of every frequency over the island. And they already signed a memorandum last week in London. He hung up before she could ask anything else. That night, Nia met Darius again in the hills. "They never stop," she said. "They just changed the name." Darius looked toward the sea. "Then we never stop either." Word spread fast. Activists, journalists, and students joined hands again. The movement evolved from the fight for beaches to the fight for sovereignty. Across Kingston, murals of Nia appeared with the phrase, "The sea remembers." But something strange happened soon after. A video surfaced online showing international agents meeting quietly with local politicians inside a luxury villa. The video showed suitcases, money, and a document stamped Project Second Tide. The leak went viral instantly. The Prime Minister denied everything. But the evidence was undeniable. The signatures were his, and the date was only a week old. He resigned the next day and fled the country. For the first time in modern history, Jamaica's people organized their own council, the People's Assembly of the Sea. It was made up of teachers, farmers, fishers, and students. No politicians, no billionaires. They passed one law. All Jamaican natural resources, above or below the sea, belong to the people forever. The world reacted with shock. Western newspapers called it nationalist madness. Others called it the first true act of Caribbean independence. But across Africa, South America, and the Pacific, people began to ask the same question: if Jamaica could reclaim its beaches, could they reclaim their land too? And then came the twist that no one expected. A message appeared on the global network signed simply, "Greetings from Ouagadougou. The revolution of dignity is not bound by borders. Jamaica, Africa salutes you." It was a statement from President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. In his speech broadcast to both continents, he said, "When an island rises, a continent listens. They will try to buy your silence, but you must sell them nothing. Not your land, not your sea, not your soul." The crowd in Kingston erupted. For the first time, Africa and the Caribbean spoke in one voice. Months later, a historic meeting took place in Addis Ababa. Leaders from small island nations and African states gathered to sign what they called the Sand and Soil Pact, promising never again to allow foreign powers to own their natural resources. When Nia Morgan stood to speak, she said quietly, "Freedom is not something you sign. It's something you guard like the sea." The audience stood and applauded for 10 full minutes. Back home, the beaches of Jamaica were alive again. Fishermen returned to their boats, children played on the shores, and old Rastafarians sat beneath palm trees singing songs about the day the sand spoke back. But beneath all the joy, one question lingered. How long before they tried again? Nia looked out to the horizon one last time. The sea was calm, but she knew the world beyond it never slept. She whispered softly, "Let them come." This time, the island knows the truth. And in that moment, a wave crashed against the shore, carrying the sound of thunder or maybe applause across the Caribbean night. The spirit of Jamaica was awake, forever.